everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Wednesday and patch 9.19 has dropped, which means it's time for another patch note rundown. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes in this week's patch and letting you guys know what you'll be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 9.19 is the World's patch, so as per usual, Riot are trying to keep changes light while still affecting the champions that are going to be viable in the professional pool, which means buffing up some champions that are not too far away from contention and nerfing down some champions that are way too strong and could use a bit of a nerf. Jumping right into things, we're going to be talking about, of course, the big two, Aatrox and Akali. Now, both of these champions are getting some small buffs in this patch, but at the end of the day, I don't really think either of these buffs are worth it for the champion or good enough to put them back into pro play. Aatrox and Akali have both lost a ton of value from their kit over the last couple of months as they've been the subject of repeated nerfs, and I don't think either of these are going to be good. Aatrox getting some wave clear back on Darkened Blade does help him, but the fact that he's not just a sustainable menace at all stages of the game means that he's still going to be very weak. I don't think he's worth it in pro play. Akali, meanwhile, did get some damage back on Perfect Execution, which is good, and it does help her a little bit in the early stages of the game, but she still has a 160-second cooldown on her ultimate at rank 1. She's just not going to find the opportunities to really use that cooldown offensively like she wants to. And so I think at the end of the day, she still isn't going to see play. These are nice buffs if you're an Akali or an Aatrox main. But at the end of the day, it's really not that much in order to help these characters see professional play. Talking about Annie, she got some big changes in the last patch, getting movement speed on her E. Riot felt that they were too conservative in the last patch, and they're giving her some power back. The movement speed on Molten Shield is now buffed, and the cooldown now decreases with rank. So if Annie wants that movement speed, she can rank this ability up and get it much more reliably, which I do think is nice, and I don't think it makes Annie too good, so we'll see how this shapes up, but I'm happy to see that they're following up on the Annie changes. The Ashe changes here are worth noting. I think Ashe is a borderline character in terms of pro play, in terms of her competitive nature. The buffing the slow on Frost Shot does help her a little bit in the early stages of the game. Starting at a flat 20% at level 1 and only getting better from there is quite nice. It means that she's just going to generally be slowing for more across the game. It's sort of 50-50 for me. I don't know if she necessarily has what it takes to compete with the current bot lanes and the current champions that are being played, but in the case that a team decides we really want a utility-based marksman, we really want a character who's just going to not die and bring something to the team, I think Ashe is now a reasonable choice and could see play in that spot, especially if Caitlyn proves to be dominant at Worlds. Talking about Blitzcrank, this is a silly buff. This is a silly buff. That's the best way I can describe this. Riot have buffed his grab range. And the static field buff is whatever. Okay, nice quality of life change for Blitzcrank. But the grab range on Rocket Grab has been increased by 100 units. Now, this means that those hooks that just barely missed you before are going to hit. And this is going to play havoc on players, and this is one of the reasons why Riot doesn't buff or nerf ranges very often, and it's because players get used to the range on their own champion's ability or on their opponent's abilities, and they kind of adjust for how they can deal with that. So the fact that Blitzcrank now has the extra 100 range, that means a lot of players that assume I'm safe aren't anymore. And I think that's going to be the number one reason why Blitzcrank either gets nerfed in the next patch or it just has a massive spike in ban rate over this next week or so, because there are going to be a lot of players trying to figure out, oh yeah, that is going to hit now because that's a bigger range. It does look small on paper, but trust me, this is going to really mess some players up. I don't think he needed it either, but this is where we're at, so we'll see how it goes for him. If you're a Blitzcrank player, you're very happy because this is more hooks hitting for you. But anyways, moving on. Talking about Fiora. Now, these are some really spicy buffs. The biggest problem Fiora has right now is that she's able to win top lane pretty handily, but then she can't win the game because all she can really do is AFK split push and hopefully duel, in 1v2 scenarios or in 1v1 scenarios, and just in general, it makes it hard for her to actually win games because her team fighting is so bad. Now, all of these buffs don't give her any power against champions, which I think is fair. She already duels every champion in the game on even footing, so the fact that this is just PvE buffs is good. But Lunge can hit towers, and Blade Work can crit towers. That's nuts. That means Fiora will really be able to annihilate towers, especially if she's got Demolish at the ready as well. And this really means that if you leave Fiora alone in a side lane, she is going to absolutely destroy your base. So this is an interesting buff. I do like that Riot gave her a little bit more power without just making her straight better in all regards. But I do think it might be a little silly. I still don't think it's good enough for her to see play at Worlds, but I do think is really good. If you're a Fiora main, this is going to be really nice, and especially if you're already used to being able to win the game, or win the lane but not win the game, this might be what it takes for Fiora to sort of hop the edge and get into that, but we'll see how it shapes out in the long run. Moving on to Gragas. Of course, it's Worlds, so Gragas is getting nerfed because he's too good always. And Sejuani's getting nerfed as well. Those two, it seems like, always go hand in hand because they're both tank junglers that gank well, which is something that most tank junglers don't have. So it does make sense, but Gragas is going to get nerfed in a way that will reduce his clear speed. Drunken Rage's cooldown is slightly up, so it'll take him a little bit longer time for that enhanced auto attack and the sustain on that ability. And the damage ratio is down as well, so he won't be doing as much damage. This is very small changes, but especially when it comes to jungle clear, it doesn't matter that much. You don't have to tweak that much in order to really have an influence, because if it takes Gragas, let's say, a second more to clear his first camp, well, then he's 2 seconds behind after his second camp, he's 3 seconds behind after his third camp, so on and so forth. So you don't need that big of changes in order to affect it. I think this will be enough to really make it so that teams have to say, we want what Gragas brings to the table, rather than just, he's a tank jungler that ganks well. Talking about Graves, he's getting buffed on this patch as well. I don't think he's been that far out of contention for a long period of time, and the base stat buffs he's getting, obviously there's some rounding here that Riot is doing, but for the most part, these are just giving him straight buffs. Again, they're very small changes, but they do make Graves feel much better in the early stages of the game. Does he see pro play? Maybe. I could see some edge cases where Graves does get played, but generally there's going to be a solo queue level buff that'll make Graves feel a little bit better if you are a solo queue warrior. Moving on to Karma, they're nerfing Karma's non-support damage, so the damage ratio on her Q1 is down. I don't think this is exactly what Riot want. I do think it affects her ability to be playing the support position as well, because you do sort of get incidental AP from things like Ardent Sensor or the Athene's Grail. There's a lot of things that it is going to nerf support Karma. This is a bigger nerf to mid lane Karma, so I do quite like that, but it does just nerf the champion across the board, which is maybe not what you wanted, as I don't think she was too far out in the support category. I feel like she's just not going to see play at Worlds anymore after this nerf, but again, we'll have to see. I could always be surprised. More buffs. I know that's a scary word to say, but Mordekaiser I don't think is actually that good. And I think that's been the case for a lot of professional teams, realizing, yeah, Mord's decent, but he's not just like instantly pick this champion and you win. Now, and this is a very small buff too. This doesn't really influence how strong Mordekaiser is in the top lane and his ability to bully champions. This just increases his durability, especially in teamfights or extended trades. So I do like this change. It makes Mord a little bit better, especially in losing matchups, but I don't think it's good enough to put him back to the forefront of the top lane meta, especially in professional play. So overall, not that much, but nice if you play him. Orianna, very small buff here. Sorry, not small as in like it doesn't do that much for the champion. Small buff in that it's just one ability, but it's her ultimate, which is doing more damage with a better AP ratio, because an ability with this much utility also needed to do more damage. Utility champion, everybody. But salt aside, this is going to be big for Orianna. We're going to see Orianna at Worlds anyways, because she has utility. She has a ton of damage now. She sets up well for a lot of the champions that want to be initiating, so we'll see Orianna, especially with this change. Going on to talk about Riven here. I know a lot of us were disappointed with the fact that Riven got buffs, and Riot essentially said, yeah, okay, we might have overbuffed her, but they're nerfing her Broken Wings cooldown, which is fine. Now, it still scales down it still cools down after the first cast, so it's not really that big of a deal having an additional second. It means that a primary combat tool is going to be slightly less common, but Riven already maxes out CDR fairly quickly, so mostly irrelevant. The biggest thing here is she's getting compensation buffs for the fact that they slightly nerfed her primary damage ability. So Valor's cooldown now scales down with rank. So this is usually a last max, I believe. I'm not really a Riven player, so let me know if I'm totally wrong on that. But I believe that's a last max, so that's not that big of a deal. It gives her some survivability in the early stage or in the later stages of the game. So maybe it's not that big of a deal, but it does kind of seem silly that Riven is getting some compensation buffs after Riot barely touched her Q. But we'll see how it shapes up at the end of the day. I think it's too much, but, you know, maybe I'll be proven wrong on this one. Sejuani, I mentioned her earlier when the Gragas gets nerfed. Pretty much Sejuani gets nerfed as well because those two champions tend to go hand in hand as to which one is better. Sejuani is getting significantly decreased damage. Icebreaker is now only doing 10% of the target's maximum health, as opposed to scaling up with her level. So, especially in the later stages of the game, Sejuani won't be as good at just soloing out a target by proccing Icebreaker multiple times, getting 20% chunks of a target's maximum health. This is a big change. I don't know that it makes Sejuani that much weaker, so there's still a good potential that we see here at Worlds, but it definitely does hurt her ability to damage enemy champions, especially when you start getting towards those later game fights. So we'll have to see how it works out for her. Moving on to Sion. I don't think Sion's that far out of professional play, especially not after he got some compensation buffs for the last time he got nerfed, and this is another buff on top of that, with the base shield on Soul Furnace becoming much better. So this could be enough to put Sion back in the top lane. It depends on if tanks are actually going to be viable at Worlds, but if they are, and especially if a lot of the more common picks start getting banned out, I could definitely see Sion coming back. Sylas is getting nerfed again. He's too generalist. He just has so much that his kit does for him, not even regarding the fact that he can steal ultimates and turn them back around on their wielders. So basically, he's getting nerfed across the board, so he won't be 100% pick ban at Worlds. Will he still be at Worlds? 100%. This character is gross. But hopefully this means that he's not just the go-to champion in every situation, and teams have to think carefully about when they want to play him. Base armor and armor growth are going down, so he's at least a little bit more tradable, especially if you're playing like an AD mid or AD top laner. And Petricite burst damage ratio is being changed. So it scales slightly better with AD ratio, the same with AP ratio, but that's only to the primary target. Everything else is nerfed. So that means that Sylas is less good at going into the middle of enemy teams and bursting everybody at the same time by repeatedly proccing Petricite Burst, which funnily enough has been the hardest to balance part of his kit, is just the fact that he gets that bonus damage after every spell cast. So this is a relevant nerf. I think it does tone down Sylas's power a little bit. It doesn't affect his ability to trade in lane that much because he still is going to be doing quite a bit of damage by constantly proccing Petricite Burst, but the fact that his defenses are lower means that there's maybe some opportunity to trade with him, so we'll see. Finally, talking about, well, Yuumi. I think that's the best one to close out on here. Obviously, she needs nerfs. She's still 100% pick ban. You pretty much play anything you want with Yuumi. It doesn't matter what your bot lane composition is. You pick that champion if it's available because she's nuts. So, she's getting nerfed. The Prowling Projectile is being changed. It now only has a 20% slow at all ranks, which is very nice because this is already a first max because Yuumi would try to just go for as much poke and lane as possible. And the fact that it was an 80% slow on a more or less undodgeable skill shot made her chase down potential incredibly good in the later stages of the game. So the fact that there's a 20% slow at all ranks is really nice, and it's only a 1 second slow as opposed to 1.5. Now, it no longer decays over time, but this is still a net nerf. Going from 80% to 20% at maximum rank means that Yuumi's ability to sort of chase down enemy champions in the later stages of the game is severely curtailed. She's still really good, don't get me wrong, but this does at least remove some of the power of her kit and make her a lot more about poking and providing incidental value to her carry, as opposed to being able to have the carry the Yuumi towards the enemy champion, slow them by 80%, set up the pick, set up the play, and then kill the team off the back of that. So this is a nice nerf. I like where this is positioned. And that's actually going to be it. The rest of these changes, I think, are very small. I don't think they have that much to do with the professional meta, but we'll have to see how they shape up at the end of the day. But I think those are the bigger changes going into the Worlds patch. Let me know what changes you guys are most excited for down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. And if you're looking for more Grab the Lantern content, you can check out my blog, linked in the description. I upload articles talking about League of Legends, competitive scene, community scene, all sorts of stuff, so go ahead and check that out if you're interested. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.